G'day and welcome to the Inforunners. I'm Execute, joined today by Algared. How you doing, buddy?
Good evening. Welcome to our talk show. I'm doing fairly well. I'm tired. I'll be honest. It's been a long, even though it's Monday, it's been a long day.
Yeah, I'm still still recovering, but I'm getting there slowly, so it's good. But today we wanted to do, how do I explain this? It's kind of like when we do a Fix My Fleet, we always have this kind of like intro that we do with people about why we do what we do and a lot of the decisions behind our choices, right? And we've kind of realized we've never really kind of done that as just a concise thing that someone can look at. And so this kind of explains our choices.
So if you're someone who's looking for a Fix My Fleet, this in a sense is a primer of where we're coming from and part of our thinking. It's part of the thinking behind the buy big, earn down. It's part of the thinking behind sell your fighters.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a consolidation of all those ideas. So if you really wanted to, you could kind of take this and start to kind of apply it to your own fleet. And this is kind of part one. We're also going to do another episode next week. And we were thinking that we have to do this one first. So when that one comes, hopefully next week, unless we get another show or a special guest or something, when that one comes, they are a pairing. And I just felt this had to come before that. And I think Algared agreed with me on that.
So what we'll do is we'll go through some of the caveats that we use in terms of laying up the groundwork. We'll then look at the main ships we recommend and why we recommend them. And some of the factors are totally different. They're depending on the ship, the reasons why change.
Depending how we're going for time, we'll probably go through a few outliers as well, because there are some that kind of break the mold. And I actually think that I'll start with that as the very first caveat, actually, is if you want a ship, you get the ship, you know. This is just generalized advice, and, you know, if there's that ship that you just must absolutely have, you go get it. This is only advice, and we say this to everybody that comes from Fix My Fleet. Don't let us dictate to you. This is just generalized advice, and we try to explain why. And sometimes people don't understand it, and we do have to go over this multiple times. But as we've done, how many times have we done this now? Too many times. But
we've done lots of Fix My Fleets now. So and lots of Fix My Fleets that even haven't been on camera. So.
And this is not just us too. This is a lot of the supporters and, you know, a few of the other guys.
A lot of those guys in our chat who have drunk our Kool-Aid.
Yeah. So this has gone through like refined. Like they've come in and said something and it's added to it or changed it and stuff like that. So this is I think I'll say a well-rehearsed formula. I'll leave it at that. So
well, if you even look at the early sell your fighters, we used to say anything under $200, or actually originally it was just sell your fighters, and now there's anything under 200, and now we've kind of gone, well, in a general case, anything under 250 is becoming has kind of got the sell factor.
It's because we're trying.
Prices are going up. Part of it is just because
it's because we're trying to make those rules simplified, and I think that's a bit of what this episode is. Like we've always tried to make it simple, but there are caveats that change things. So we will kind of go through that a little bit. Actually, kind of like right now, I guess is a good time to go through it. So you mentioned ships under $250. So let's start there, right? So why do we not recommend ships under $250, Algared? Generally speaking.
Part of the reason we don't recommend ships under $250 is their value in game is so much lower.
Yep.
And so if you look at currently look at a shipping game that's under $250 and look at the game value, it is minuscule compared to, say, a ship that's $500 or $600. And so it's easier to earn those really small ships a lot quicker than it is to earn those big ships.
Yeah.
And even though those alpha UEC prices are going to change, they're going to go up, and in fact, they're most likely going to go up.
You can kind of see the writing on the wall, though, can't you? With some of them already,
Yeah. So even if those $250 ships go up 5 times on their current price, the price of the bigger ships is going to go up 5, 10, 15 times, and it goes back to things Chris Roberts said in 10 for the Chairman, and I think with an interview with you where he said, if you look at an Aurora as like a sedan, the price of that sedan is X. You know, everyone can get it. But then you look at, say, an Idris or a Bengal or an Idris or at that time it was an Idris, and he said that's like buying a super carrier. The price of that is astronomically increased compared to that little ship. And so earning those big ships or having those ships that are around that price or higher is going to be significantly harder to earn in game than say that little fighter.
So the example he gave to me was an Aurora will stay roughly the same, a Constellation might be 5 times more, and then say something like an Idris might be 10 times more. And just to give you an example, in game right now, you've got something like the Hurricane that costs I think it's $195 and in game it's like 1.2 mil or 1.3 mil. Then you've got say something like the Carrack, which is $600, but in game it's 26 mil. That's a huge in-game price disparity. And that's the type of thing we're talking about. And that's why something like, say, the Hurricane is not good value for its price to dollar. What is it? A dollar to alpha UEC ratio is kind of essentially...
And eventually dollar to UEC value.
Yes.
And that really is, pardon me.
The crux of it.
That really is the crux of the whole of what we do.
100%.
That's in a nutshell. Good night. Bye, we're out of here.
So let's go back and kind of refine that a little bit now. So if you actually look at something like, I'm just going to close the window here. Hang on, something's making noise. If you actually look at the, ships under $250, let's refine that. So the other part of that comes in is combat ships, right? That's the first caveat I'll come in, because mostly combat ships are really overpriced, right? And so one of the ones that I like to shit on because it's Badger's favorite is the Perseus, right? So the Perseus is clearly, if you look at the size of it and what it does and the crew and stuff like that, it's roughly a $350 ship. Like, things like the Starfarer, the Hercules series, the Caterpillar, they're all around it in a similar size, and they're all similar in that price point. But then you've got the Perseus, because it's combat, it's just blown right out, right? And I can give other examples, but I'm just picking on that one specifically. But
because Badgers isn't here as well.
Yeah, exactly.
He loves the ship, and we like to rip him over it. So
not saying
Badgers.
Not saying it's a bad ship, right? We want to say that as well, but it's bad value, right? And it's the same thing when you look at say something like I just mentioned the Hurricane, because it's also combat.
Well, another classic is a ship I do really like. I like the look of it. I like the feel of it. Is the Prowler.
Yep.
Absolutely gorgeous ship. Love it to fly. It looks awesome. It looks deadly. It looks stealthy and all the rest of it. And yet, in game, it's cheaper than.
Well, you've jumped the gun. Alien ships. That was another caveat. But yeah, you are 100% correct. So alien ships. Obviously there's a real caveat exception there as well, which is the Banu Merchantman, because it started out at $250 and it now looks like it's going to be almost $1,000. So. Yep. But yeah, generally speaking, if you look at things like the Blade, the Glaive, as you mentioned, the Prowler, I'd even possibly argue one that's in a better position but still bad is the Defender, because that's a light fighter, but it's priced way up there like it's a heavy fighter.
And part of it is because it's long range. It's got the beds. And it's even got that ability to the synergy with the BMM, and so it's got pluses in terms of everything. But it's a light fighter, and
So there are things that come into play on a lot of these things too. Like a lot of people go, oh, they might be behind rep walls, so yeah, it might be harder to get an alien ship because of the rep wall. But there are things like, let's take that Defender example. Those particular Defenders are made for the human market. So if they're making for the human market, they can't be that hard to obtain, because they're being exported by the Banu. I think that said, though, I think something like a Merchantman, because of its sheer size, will be harder to obtain.
But even though I think because CIG have sold so many of them, the lore, I think, has shifted significantly from being that limited Banu family ship that's been passed on, and if you've managed to get it, it's awesome, to being a ship that's being built for the human market. And I think that is just something that is just par for the course. But even because of that, even with that, just the sheer size of it will mean it's harder to get.
And in something that no one saw coming, the last caveat will be Origin. And that is, it falls into the same ballpark. Luxury is the same thing. I've always wanted Origin to just do more. Like, a lot of people think I hate Origin. I just want better for them, right? I think the ships look really cool, but looking really cool but not doing anything is kind of, yeah, I don't know what's the word to use there, Algared.
It's if it looks cool but does nothing, what's the
yeah,
point?
it's kind of like non-functional, isn't it? It's almost like having a Ferrari with no tires. Like, it looks good, but you can't go anywhere. So, yeah.
The argument you put for Origin is often, is generally the argument I've put forward for the marketing of the Odyssey. The Odyssey, we think, should be an awesome ship, but the marketing for it basically said, oh, it's got a beautiful lift and a beautiful gravity generator, and oh, look, a rule of cool window out the back. Who gives a rat's about those things? If you don't tell us why the ship is valuable or useful or everything else and works at being at that price, I don't give a rat's.
They do. I will say this too. It does feel like Origin are getting there, though. So the last ship that came out, the 400i, felt way more closer to what I wanted it to be than anything else. So if they can improve and just keep making that progress forward, I'm hopeful Origin will get to where I want it to get to. So
yeah, I look at ships like the 890, and I think that is way overpriced for what it is. Even if it is the Bentley that's the size of a novice block, which is one description I was given by a CIG employee. And I think that's true. And yes, I know that's the argument, can the 890 be an Explorer? Yeah, it can. And does it have the equipment to do that? Yeah, it does have the same basic ship stat scanning unit as a carry. But I don't think it makes it necessarily a awesome Explorer. It can be used in that, just like you can use every ship in that, but yeah.
I think the other part of it you could take into is the Banner Merchantman is still cheaper than the original concept price of the 890 jump, which was, I believe, it was $650, yeah?
Yeah, about that. May have been 600. I'd have to go back and check.
But you get my point. Like, when that's an alien ship and now on par for size, I find that quite astounding. So, yeah.
Admittedly, when it first came out, it was significantly smaller.
It was.
So,
yeah. Yes, and we've talked about that too. As I said, the Banner Merchantman's a very rare niche case where I think that'll probably want to be the best value ships in the entire game now. We had other things like the Idris when it changed from frigate to Corvette or whatever it did, the opposite Corvette to frigate.
I can remember Chris saying, the Idris was probably really best value you've ever got in terms of it going from a Corvette to a frigate, and it was going from $1,000 to $1,200. In terms of what it is now, but just in terms of what you got. But the Merchantman went from a $250 alien cargo ship
it's
to
almost
basically being an alien capital.
Well, it's going to work out more than three times its value, because it's at least going to go up by another $50 to $100 when it releases. So we've even postulated it could as an outlier price be as much as an 890. That's kind of the extreme end of what we've thought, isn't it? All right, so
so
I'm going to move on to the ships. These are the kind of the core ships we recommend. There are others. How do I put this, Algared? There are other outliers, and there are other ships that are not on this list. And I think the way I'd kind of consolidate this is they're more niche. And there are ones like that we would recommend for orgs. So let's caveat that a bit. So things like the Kraken and the Idris, we tend to only recommend those to people that are they've already spent too much money, and they've got bigger org play. And they want to
say, I really must have a Kraken, or I really must have an Idris, and then you go, oh yeah, fine, okay,
100%.
We'll work everything else around it.
Yeah, 100%. But that's not that we recommend to everyone. But you guys are seeing Fix My Fleet. Some of the fleets are just ridiculous in size, and they've spent so much money. Again, with that, that's the other thing I got to talk about. We didn't even talk about that. The earn down.
The earn down.
Yeah. So
that's another one of the things we kind of talk about a lot is earning down.
This is the image I always show. This is not my image. I found this on Reddit, and this explains the earn down economy really, really well. So this guy took his Carrack and he brought this and this and this and this, and he earned down. He was taking one to earn the one underneath. But if you go the other way, how long do you reckon it would take you to take that M50 and earn the Carrack? It would take a really
Yeah,
long
especially
time.
since the M50 can't do cargo missions at all. It can't even
Yeah.
do box missions, I don't think.
So,
So you're really struggling with that.
yeah,
Yeah.
Fundamentally, if you have one big ship like a Carrack, right, you can very quickly earn a lot of things underneath. So rather than having, and I'm just going to use the example so it makes sense. Say we had 10 M50s, you cannot use them in any meaningful way to get to a Carrack very quickly. Even if you had 10 separate people, it still would be way slower than one Carrack, right? So basically, that's the fundamental tenet of what we talk about, right? So if you see something like someone goes, oh, I've got a vulture, and we go, well, get rid of the vulture and get a reclaimer, right? Because you can take the reclaimer and you can earn down. And obviously you don't have to stay within the profession path, but if people like salvage, we tend to recommend they stay within the profession path. So you could essentially have a reclaimer but go completely sideways and say, for example, earn a prospector.
Yeah. And one of the things like we often do talk about with the, looks like we've frozen there, but hopefully we'll come back. One of the things that we do talk about with the Vulture, for example, is even though we say it's not a ship really that's in that 250 range that's worth keeping, it is a ship we often say, hey, this will scale up and work well with it, with a reclaimer. And so even within that, don't buy a ship that's under 250. There are, again, caveats within that, and ships that we go, well, this works well with that ship, but then there are other ships you say this doesn't work well.
And we're also not saying they're bad either. Like,
No.
I always remember back to John, right? Because John took such a long time to understand this metro. And sorry to pick on you, John, but once he understood it, right, with his Fix My Fleet, he understood what we were trying to say. We were literally just trying to save him dollars and make his fleet go further.
Yep.
I almost choked on my lozenge.
And I think one of the other things is, like, I think initially when he started, when we were talking to John, he initially thought saying the Prospector was bad, and he said, but I love my Prospector.
Yeah.
It's my go-to ship. And man, John is probably one of the few people I think could take a Prospector and very quickly turn up.
100%.
Just because he's just such a good miner. You know, you go out with John and you we'll get this one. Oh yeah, we'll leave that. Well, those asteroids over there, we're leaving them. They're not even. He's the luckiest miner I know. He just goes, he says, yep, that's Quantanium, we're going there, get that, yep, no, ignoring that, yeah, that's only small. And he looks like he hasn't even scanned it, and he says, yeah, that's small, and you go and scan it, and small Quantanium.
You definitely feel schooled, don't you, when you play with John? He puts in your place like pretty quick.
Yeah. He certainly puts you in your place. And I think that's the same with most professions. You'll see
people come out of
who really do, they will ace and walk all over anyone who's just a casual.
So now we've shown you that image. I hope that kind of makes sense, because this is the one that we kind of use all the time. I do have another image that kind of shows the ratio of alpha UEC to dollar value as well. And all those ships up the top, believe it or not, one of those ships up the top is actually the 890 Jump. For its dollar value, it's actually quite good.
I think it's the best one in terms of dollar to...
it's about the 4th or 5th, but
it's very, very high up there.
The Carrack's the top one, and then the Reclaimer's second, believe it or not.
But, and that's just their dollar value compared to their alpha UEC cost is. So, you know, $1 is worth thousands of alpha UEC as opposed to some ships that are really, really low. Anyway, let's have a look at some of those ships that we recommend. And to our regular backers and those who watch Fix My Fleet a lot, the first couple won't be a surprise.
Yeah. The Endeavour. So, sure. This one's really obvious. You know, it's such a cheap ship for what you're getting, and it multiplies not just the fact that the ship is going to grow in size, is the fact that you get so many different gameplays through the modules. You know, I have asked John Crew a few times, and they didn't answer it until last year, but I literally got them to ask the question, like, why does John Crew look like he's in despair when he always mentions this ship, because he just knows how much work he has to do because of all the modules, and it's such a large ship. It is the largest modular ship we're going to see. And
they'd always said it was going to be the last ship they did in terms of that regard. So
so you are in for the long term, but you know, it's again, we probably won't see the increase the same as the Beta Merchantman, but it could be akin to that, right? And and you know, one of our best episodes we've ever done was the Last Chance for the Endeavour, which was which span off into the Ship Scrutiny series. But long story short, this ship, you know, it could potentially get as big as a Bengal, right? And currently it's only like 250 meters long, and it's got to grow because of things that have happened. It's one of the 2 last ships with the Crucible that are back from the old design, so it's definitely increased from that. But then you like look at what this is trying to do. It's almost like a mini city. It's like a full hospital. This thing has to grow, right? And you go look at the hangar alone, and in the episode we went through that, this ship could potentially be almost a kilometer long. So that's 4 times the size it is right now. That's just ludicrous. Yeah, and for the dollar value, you just can't go past that at its current price point.
Yeah, but we often recommend the base version of the Endeavour rather than the variants, and the base version rather than getting the complete set.
Yep.
If you really, really want them, go for it. But the reason we do that is because when you look at the dollar value of each of the modules, most of them are under $100. They're $30, $20, $40. I think the most expensive are only $100.
I think there's one that's 150, but I forgot which one it is. But again, yeah, they're going to be like fighters, aren't they? They're all under $250.
And for most of them, even if you tripled or quadrupled the price, they're still under that sell your fighters type pricing. And so we expect they'll follow the pricing of fighters and be easy to earn in game.
Another way to look at it is like the master set's over $1,000, but you could literally get like 3 Endeavours almost, or almost more. Especially if you can get CCUs to bring the price down, you could literally get 4 Endeavours, and I would take 4 Endeavours over modules any day of the week. So I just want to say real quick, it's the price of this ship combined with the multiple gameplays it offers that just puts this into a whole nother god tier level. Like we did an episode on that too, god tier Endeavour. That's why. So if you want to know why I recommend the Endeavour, it's those 2 episodes: god tier, god tier Endeavour, and Last Chance for the Endeavour. Those 2 there. If it can't see on that ship, nothing will.
Yep. And the other thing to take into account is, even though we recommend the Endeavour at 350. That's an Endeavour without any modules, and so that is probably the one ship in the list of ships we recommend that you wouldn't be able to earn very quickly down, because you've actually got to buy the modules to start with. But we think it's such a good value at the present point in terms of what's going to happen in terms of growth, in terms of what options you've got in terms of modules to add. At the price it's still at its original concept price.
I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there a little bit. So it's kind of like the second ship you buy. It's not the only ship you buy.
Yeah.
And that's probably a really important thing to point out, because we recommend it without the modules. And also, chances are when you change those modules, much like something like a Kraken or an Idris, you'll have to go to you'll have to go to a big shipyard to get it changed.
And it'll take time, and so there'll be other factors that come in. But
at least
it's such a massive
ship. At least you can, where other ships, like say, let's just pick one that's probably like an Idris. You can change the guns in Idris, so that's a bad example.
Even a Javelin, because it's got 6 modules.
But there are ships that just don't have modules, so they don't have that flexibility.
An Odyssey. I think that's the only one we've got that hasn't. Got that, but
All right. And in no surprises to people that know us, the second cab off the rank is the Crucible. Similar reasons to the Endeavour, where it's just it's the second ship that's from that old design, so it's got to increase in size. It's the largest repair ship we have right now. I would argue that it's. I'd have to look, because they didn't really talk about the modules, but I believe this is capital. But if it's not capital and it turns out to be large, we may get a capital repair ship. But Algared, do you believe it's capital, or do you think it falls into large? Because we don't really have the stats on it, do we? Because they just didn't
I'd have to go look at the Matrix of Lies, and I'm not sure how much of the Matrix of Lies has got in there. But it was always a ship that was designed or envisaged to be repairing Idrises and Javelins.
Yep. So that kind of tells you
Bengals and other stuff. So
kind of tells you where they're aiming it, yeah.
Yeah. So that gave you an idea of where they're aiming it. And originally, they had the idea of ships working together to build a lattice kind of framework around the ship that we're repairing, and then that became the Scarab, which was a garage for a small ship. like a fighter, and
Oh, give him a couple of seconds, he'll come back. Or he won't. Oh, I might have lost him completely. And I hope I haven't.
I'll see about this.
There he is. He's back. All right.
There you go.
Yeah. So yeah, the Crucible, I think for me, the interesting thing is how much it potentially may go up in price. Because like I look at other ships, I don't know. I'm going to ballpark guess it, right? And you feel free to shoot me down. But I'm thinking final price may be around $500. What do you think?
I would imagine the price of this would go at minimum the price of a Reclaimer.
Mm-hmm.
At maximum the price of an Orion.
Yep.
Because it's the same. It seems to be the same size, same class. Two ships. So, in answer to your, do I think it's a capital ship? Yes, because the two ships that are kind of came out equivalent to it in terms of the other industries were capital. So
I think it kind of does think capital because it's designed to repair things like the Idris and stuff. So I think it's kind of targeted at, yes, it can repair smaller ships, but you know, so can a Vulcan. You know, I just think it's at a different level. It seems to be able to be very kind of ambidextrous, and it can repair everything. And technically, it can land on planet, and it's got a ramp, and vehicles will be able to drive into that scarab and stuff like that. But do I think we will see other repair ships? Absolutely. Yeah. Especially, I'm fully expecting something like a garage, but I'm going off on a tangent again here. Long story short, Crucible is really good value for its current price point because it seems underpriced for what it is.
Yeah, and it is still, again, like the Endeavour, it's still at its original concept. And again, that's...
We also know there are a lot of... not a lot of people buy them. There's a lot of orgs. Like, we go look at the org, and there'll be like 100 people in the org, and they'll have like 2 Crucibles. And we're like, what the hell? You know, if you have a capital ship, you almost need a Crucible, because if you're in a system where there is no shipyard to repair it, how are you going to get it to said shipyard, especially if it's 2 systems away, right? So the only way you're getting it out of there is with a Crucible. So if you don't have the Crucible, you're going to have to get the Crucible from someone else, right? Yeah. So, and that's going to obviously cost you an arm and a leg.
Orgs, you know, 2 Crucibles in an org of 100 or 200.
Yep.
And you'll ask them, how many capitals? Oh, we got 15 Javelins, 24 Idrises.
You kind of got to look at it like medical for ships, don't you?
Yeah. It's a ship medical unit.
And people are medical. If you look at what happened with the Cutlass Red and respawning beds and stuff like that, you can start to see why they were important, because that's now in game. We don't really have repair in game yet, but if you can look at how important medical is, I think you can very quickly look and see how important repair is. If you just look at it repairing, medical for ships.
Yeah, you might be okay, but if your ship's screwed, you're going to be screwed.
Yeah.
So being able to repair stuff is really important. So hence why we are probably known by a lot of people as the Cult of the Endeavour and Cult of the Crucible. Or is it Cult of the Endeavour and Church of the Crucible? One of the two. Yeah. You get the idea. Next.
I can't remember. I'd have to look it up again. All right, so my favourite ship, the Reclaimer. So like the next few couple of ships, they're industry based. So basically, they are good. There are currently 3 ships that take stuff directly out of the game, and they don't really rely on another person, so to speak. So if you look at, say, something like cargo, they require you buy from someone, transport, and then sell for someone. So they rely for 2 people. Where with a Reclaimer, you can collect stuff and then you sell stuff. So it's only one-sided.
Yeah.
And I think we could probably throw this one in there as well, Algared, which would also be the Orion. And it's much the same, where you're taking stuff out of the game, and basically it doesn't so much rely on other people. So your profit is higher.
And I do, I think the Reclaimer's got some form of refinery or processing plant.
Yep.
And the Orion's got some form of refinery as well.
Yep.
How well they work and what they're exactly doing, we don't know yet, because that's not in for those ships and working. But it certainly is. They've got, I suppose, systems on the ship that will value add to the raw materials, which certainly the Prospector and the Mole don't have. And
Uh,
we also expect, because that's the capital ship, we do expect there'll be a large ship in between somewhere. So
if we're looking at something like the Starfarer and the Expanse, with the number of refineries on the Starfarer and the number on the Expanse, I'd still imagine they're a very low number of refineries, and they're really just for getting rid of that volatility of stuff. The Reclaimer and the Orion, and there's a couple of more ships we're about to talk about down there. We're at the bottom of the list, but we'll come back to this type of thing in a minute. So, next one, obviously we mentioned it before, was the Merchantman. Again, it's an alien ship at $250 if you can still get it for $250, or if you have it for $250, incredibly good value. And if you kind of look at it in a weird way, it is currently $600, but it looks like it's going to be priced like the 890 jump. So if you actually look at like the 890 jump that was $650 and it's jumped to, what is it, $950 or $1,000
$980,
now?
I believe.
$980, that would be the same. If that we're expecting the Battle Merchantman to do the same. So I know it sounds weird because it's 600 and it was 250, but it's still potentially incredibly good value. So also being the size it is and the ability to kind of sell stuff off, it just has that. There's a couple of things over other cargo ships that they don't have.
Yeah, and in terms of value for money, if you've got one of those early ones, even if you got one that was when it was at around $300, that is still significantly cheaper than what it is now, and so you're still getting good value. And I would probably be of the opinion that if you've got one of those cheap ones in your hangar, in your melt hangar, it's worth considering getting it out, just because we know there soon to be inklings that down the track the prices of ships in your buyback are going to shift. At the moment, if you've got it in buyback, it's at the same price you bought it for. But we understand that's going to change, and they're just going to become the price that they currently are.
So that was a question we had during the week, didn't we? We had someone asking us, should I get a $250 Battle Merchantman out of buyback because it's only got 6 months insurance? And we were like, yes, you should get that, because at the end of the day, insurance is not the be all and end all. And again, Chris has said that basically you can do one mission once a month with that ship, and it should easily pay for its insurance. So that's very little. You're going about 10, 15 minutes of your time to cover your insurance for the entire month.
And despite the fact that the community has always taken the view that LTI is, they say, I must have it, I must have it. CIG has always, I can remember even as early as said, lifetime insurance is no different from ship hull insurance. The only difference is it's a convenience. You don't have to worry about that.
And they've said things. They've said things too, like you've still got to insure your cargo. You've still got to, if you change the guns, you've got to redo the insurance for them, components, blah blah blah. So it's only this base level. So
it's only the base level they sell. So you look at the components and stuff that's on the ship they sell. That's what's covered by ship hull insurance and lifetime insurance. It's not the cargo. It's not any changes you make. It's not any weapon upgrade, component upgrades. It's just those things. And so you're going to want to be insuring stuff as well, because any game, they want money sinks.
Nice to have, and I think it's probably more essential on a ship that's bigger. So something like a Kraken, where there is just really much higher costs. Yes, you kind of and again, if it's over $1,000, you get it automatically anyway. So yeah. All right, next cab off the rank. Again, in no surprise, the Carrack. Again, like we said, it's the highest alpha UC ratio to dollar value currently that we have in the game at 26 million for $600. And I think one other thing, Algared, that I only thought of when we were talking about it before was the modules. It's got a bunch of modules that we don't know anything about.
3 modules that you can, and I know, like, we don't know what they are, but we know they have about extra cabins for crew, extra science stations. They've got the cargo modules. John Crew did postulate that maybe down the track they could make one big hangar type module that could take a ballista. So we know there's a variety of different modules that are coming. We don't, apart from the cargo ones, we just don't know what they are at the moment.
I just remembered something about the Merchantman too, I want to say real quick. We did do a video on the Merchantman about why it was increasing in size and stuff, but I will actually, up in the cards up there, I will do the ones for both the Endeavour the Crucible, and any episodes we've done on ships, I will chuck them up in the cards, so you can just go through the list and find the one if you want to look at it. But yeah, sorry, the Carrack Algared. Yeah, also, obviously, you mentioned before the show too, it comes with a Rover and a Pisces. That's really good value. None of the others come with something like that. So yeah, and it what was it? Originally $350, and it's now jumped to $600. Like at $350, that thing's a steal. Like just the amount of stuff that this ship did was ridiculous. And I would still argue, if you take off the Rover and the Pisces, it goes down to about $500. And even at that price,
it's still a ship, but we'd still say, look, it's worth getting.
Yeah.
And these days with Warbond CCUs. A $500 ship is very easy to get if you plan your Warbond CCUs out and put your money in a little bit at a time. It's very easy to get those bigger ships down to half price. And that's just without much effort. And I know we bagged the Perseus earlier, but I used old CCUs I had in stock and a referral token, and I was able to get that ship for half price or less than half price. And that was without even trying. And I reckon if I'd been using Warbond CCUs and had picked them up along the way, I could have got it for significantly less, and that's just the way it is. And that's half the original concept price. And so easy to do that with most ships, as long as they're not limited and not available. But yeah.
A very common ship that a lot of people can own. And I think even if you started out just doing cargo runs, you would make enough money in it to very quickly roll out into other ships.
Well, as you saw from the the diagram, the first one you put up, Royal Carrack, he earned everything down, and it's not necessarily a great cargo ship, but people have used it. But it's not its key purpose. Its key purpose is exploration and going into the deep and doing other stuff. But it's got so many features. It's a jack of all trades. It may not be a master of any, but it's a jack of all trades. It can pretty much do anything.
I think of the ones on this list, it's the most generalist.
Yep. Yeah. If you were after on this list, what would we say out of that list as driver to be, because it can do everything.
Yeah.
To some degree. But
all right. So this next one, I struggled with putting it on the list, but Algared convinced me, right? And so what it was is the Polaris. And the reason we kind of recommend this one at the end of the day is it's the smallest capital ship. And if you look at the other ships around its price point, so I'm talking about things like the Nautilus, the Hammerhead, the Odyssey,
even the Perseus,
the Carrack's probably a little bit in there, the A2, actually probably not the Perseus and the Odyssey and the Carrack, because they're both about $600, but the others around that $700 price point. So you've got the Perseus at $675, the Hammerhead and the Nautilus at $725, and then this at $750. This is just so much better value than those other three because it's just so much bigger. It's obviously got it's a combat ship, right? But it's also got a hangar so you can cycle fighters through it. And so it's kind of like it's like a mini Kraken in a way. It's like a support combat ship. And I was
going to say it's a mini Idris, which kind of it is, because if you remember
half
what
a
the
dozen
Idris was when we started, the Idris was a Corvette, which grew into a Carrack, and this was kind of the Corvette to replace what the Idris had been. So.
Half a dozen of one and of the other. So it's the same thing, but just being one of the smallest ships capital ships in the game, or the smallest current capital ship we have. I guess you could also argue the Reclaimer and the Crucible are now the smallest, but smallest combat capital is probably the way I'd phrase it, with the support ability, needing a smaller crew. It just doesn't seem to be overpriced like other combat ships. I think that's probably why it's on this list, is because it's one of those few outlier combat ships that just isn't blown out of price compared to others. Now, I know that sounds crazy because we're talking about a $750 ship, but the other ships that are just under it, they just seem way higher, and you get less. So yeah.
And I'm going to butt in and say to anyone who's saying, "Ow, fix your focus," it's actually the downstream or upstream is just screwy and
just bad internet where Algared lives at this time.
Bad internet, so it's the stream has just went, no, I'm backing it in. You can have lower quality.
We're gonna have to make an emoji for 8-bit Algared, I think. We're just all pixelated, but yeah. All right.
Yeah, 8-bit Al. That's what it is.
So these next two are actually not released, right? And this goes back to what we were saying about the Reclaimer and the Orion. These are the missing industry ships, right? And we have, since we've kind of found out about them, we are telling people we don't often put them up on the screen for Fix My Fleet because they're not there yet, but they are definitely coming, and I'm going to do them both at the same time, is the Unannounced Gas Miner and the Unannounced Refinery. And these are obviously the capital variants. So looking at the gas mine, you've obviously got the Starfarer that's the large, but quite honestly, I think the reason why the Starfarer is also a refueler is because that other ship is just going to tread on it so much, unless you think different, Algared. But
no, I think that's probably right. It's especially when you consider the Starfarer lost its ability to mine quantanium or harvest quantanium,
and also this, the earn down economy. You know, you can take that unannounced announced gas miner and earn the Starfarer very quickly.
Yep.
So
and it might be that you do need, and I suppose another caveat we look at is how you crew your ship. If you know you're never going to be playing with more than 5 people, then having a ship that has a minimum crew of 10 would be something. You know, we wouldn't be saying, well, if you know you're only ever going to be playing with 5 people, you may really want a Polaris, but we're saying, you know, well, you might struggle to man that.
Even so, though, we have had people come and say, but how do I mine? How do I take a Reclaimer and solo it? You would very easily be able to go into safe space and change seats like you can in a mall, go around and get one mission done to earn enough money. And the amount of money you earn is not shared with 5 people. It's just the one guy, so you earn even more money. And then you could probably go buy yourself a Vulture. It's all about bang for buck, and at least you've got the Reclaimer, so you can go back. If all you ever want to do is play with that Vulture, you can go back to the Reclaimer though and earn another ship. So all of a sudden, if you want a Prospector, it's quicker to go back to the Reclaimer and earn a Prospector than it is to take the Vulture and earn a Prospector.
And the other thing, if you know you're running over 5 people, but you want a Polaris, then you say, hey, if we all bring along an NPC to crew the ship, and then you've suddenly got 10 crew on the ship. So there are ways around those crew issues as well. But so
ideally, if you're playing with a bunch of fens, one of you would get a Reclaimer, one of you would get, one would get the Orion, one would get the gas mine, and one would get the refinery, and you're kind of all set. If you can get it between 4 friends.
Yeah. But those unannounced ships, they fit into the part of the reason we think they're there is CIG said they want a ship in every size category so small, medium, large, capital. And when you look at the professions of the ships that are there, you go, ooh, we've got a small mining ship here, but where's the large? Oh, we've got a gas miner, but we don't, and refiner, but we don't have the other ships. And so it's filling in those gaps and saying, based on what CIG have said, based on what we can see in game, we believe there is another ship there, or possibly even more.
And at the moment we've been planning for around the $600 mark, because we as new ships have come out, they've put the price up and up. So what we're looking at there is we're looking at the Orion, and we're looking at the Reclaimer, and kind of going, and the Crucible, and stuff like that, and kind of looking, $600 seem, where the Odyssey landed and other industry ships. So that's kind of where we're looking at the moment. We kind of go a bit higher just to play it safe, so that's why we're at the $600 mark. So I'm actually putting $1,200 aside, so to speak, for those 2 ships myself.
And that was after you'd said, I'm not buying any more ships, I'm done.
Yep, and that's also not even counting for Warbonds, CCUs and stuff like that. So if I can get it cheaper on the day, then I'll do that. The last thing we do need to talk about, though, is the difference of the refinery to the other 3. And by the other 3, I mean the Reclaimer, the Orion, and the gas miner, because they're all taking stuff out of game. But all 3 of them feed into refining. And so if you have the refiner, it kind of just enhances those other 3, because you're not relying on other people for your refining process. So therefore, you increase your own profits.
Yep. And so certainly if you've got a group of friends, and having a refinery ship amongst you, if you're into that industry gameplay, means one of you can bring the refinery ship, and you can actually do your refining. That means you're increasing the value of the product you've got, which means you're going to increase your profits, and that means earning the next ship down or up is going to be a lot easier for you.
Yeah, I can 100% see some kind of really big mining fleet going out with a bunch of Orions and one of these, and they're basically just feeding in, and there's a whole cargo train going backwards and forwards between where they're taking it, like, and a whole org just doing this massive mining operation, or and they do that one 2 days a week, and then they go do a whole salvage one as well, or they go do a gas one, or even go to a nebula that is mining, and like, so everyone's just bringing, you got them all running out to different areas, and they're all bringing them back to the refinery, and there's a Kraken set up, and like the whole thing, like, it's just a whole big thing, people doing security, people doing, like, it's gonna be a thing. It really is.
I can see that fleet stuff. CIG, people talk about the 100-player servers as being great for people who like fleet combats. I got that. It's great for people who want fleet mining or fleet salvage or fleet. It's going to be great for any of those things where you want to have different things and different support and different roles, let alone the combat. So don't let those pew guys sell you short.
Well, Algared, I think we've out-talked ourselves. You said we'd get 30 minutes. We're at 45, so we've done really well. But yeah. So is there anything you want to add, or anything you would like to hear? I think for myself in the comments, I'd like to hear, does this clear anything up for people? Because we've never actually really concisely put this all in one video. And at 45 minutes, this is just the rough, this is a broad overview. So you can kind of see why we never have.
Might say 45 minutes is not concise, but
we got to explain it, don't you?
For the content and explanation, it probably is fairly concise. So, tell us what you think. We'd love to hear your thoughts, even on those things like the unannounced ships, and certainly on the other ships. Are they, what are the ships you?
So this
must have.
I think
in that category.
I think we kind of need to explain that just a little bit. This is a generalized list, right? So I did say if we had more time, we'll go into other things. And one of the ones that we did talk about before we started the show was something like the Pioneer, because the Pioneer is a real outlier in a lot of ways. Like, if you are really into base building, you're going to want that ship. But one of the reasons why it's retracted off the list is because it's $800 and you can't buy any CCUs for it. Right, so it also makes it a really expensive ship, where
and it's a very niche ship in terms of, whereas a lot of the others, either have lots of modules, so they're very versatile, or we see them as indispensable, like the Crucible, and so.
And there's other ships, like, I know you like to talk about the Odyssey, where the gameplay for us just doesn't make sense, because it seems like, for me, if I wanted that gameplay, I'd use a Terrapin, and we can go through many ships and we can give many examples, but we're starting it into the area now where they become more bespoke and they break some of the rules. So that's why we've kind of kept it generalized, so it's easier to digest and understand. But we just wanted to give you a couple examples. There are ships out there, so if we haven't mentioned your ship, like we haven't gone that Nautilus or that Pioneer, the reason we haven't is they fall into outlier positions. And again, like I said right at the beginning, if you want a certain ship, you go get that ship. Don't let us. We are not dictating to you, right? We are just saying these are the rules we use for generalization. And if you can come to us and say X, we'll go get it, right? We will be. There are people we are 100% behind. There are some people that have come to us. Like, I'm thinking of the opposite too, Algared. So where people have come and said, I will not buy a Drake ship, yet they are clearly going, I want a Kraken. We've had that a couple of times, haven't we? Yeah.
Yeah, and you go, well, if you want, you've either got to wait off for a carrier, buy an Endeavour and put the carrier module on it, or the hangar module on it, and use it as a pseudo carrier, or get the Reclaimer. There's not many. Sorry, the Kraken. There's not many other options for you.
Yep.
Yeah,
I know what you meant. You're old and we're both tired, so it's fine.
Old and decrepit and I'm frozen in deep thought there.
All right. Well, with that, then I think we'll log off then, Algared. So again, let us know your thoughts. Like, subscribe. If you want to go the extra mile on Patreon, all that stuff.
Yep. It looks like my camera has decided it's called it for the day, so it's decided it's done. But if you like what we do, like Execute that, like, subscribe, hit that bell. It does help us out a lot. It does feed the algorithm. If it's just the first time, the second time, consider doing that. Join us on Discord.
I was just going to say too, because I was in hospital, we are having to get back up in the algorithm. We got slapped in the face last week on the live stream and had about half as many viewers as normal. But yeah, we're getting back in there. So yeah, if you can help us out with a few likes, I'd really appreciate it, and some comments. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, feed the algorithm by leaving comments. That's always a great thing to do. If you really like it and you want to consider helping us out in other ways, there's Patreon, there's the YouTube membership, and they will help us actually improve our equipment and hopefully improve the quality of our shows. Some of the things we're looking at doing is getting badges, a camera, possibly down the track, improving our cameras, because we both seem to have troubles. You've been good today. You haven't frozen.
Yeah, you've probably jinxed it now.
Yeah, probably have.
Well, I never thought I'd say this, but the voice in the void is Algared. I've been Execute. We'll catch you in the next one.
And we're out of here. Take care.